Hey guys, what is up? Brian Fanafan17 here. Welcome back to another Rate That Song, which means welcome back to more screen time of looking at my face on this really crappy Mac computer camera. In this series, I basically rate a song from a scale of 1 to 10. I have 10 different categories sort of representing the scale. 1 means I hate it more than broccoli at the bottom of a garbage disposal, and 10 means it is one of my all-time favorite songs. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Alright, guys, so we've got our trusty chart pulled up here. And as you guys, a little quick refresher from last episode, we did the hit songs particularly, of the early 2010s. We did 8 songs, 2 from each year, 2 from like 2010, 2011, 12, and then 13. And at the end of that episode, I gave a little hint about what the next episode would mean, and I said it was a songwriter known as the Invisible Man, or at least he has been nicknamed that. And then, as you probably clearly saw from the title and thumbnail, that is the guy who I am talking about. His name is Rod Temperton. I'm not sure how many of you all know him. He does have a bit of a fan base, but as I mentioned, it's not huge because he was not big on the celebrity lifestyle. In fact, he kind of shunned it, to be honest with you. He didn't really want to be a big celebrity, like really well known. I don't think he was really much of a singer either, so he really just, his role in the music industry was basically writing songs for other artists, many of which became pretty iconic. You may not know Rod Temperton, but if you don't know Rod Temperton, I'd still be surprised if you didn't know at least a couple of the songs he's written, because some of them are pretty iconic. Now, Fan of Vacuums 2, I know, commented on my last video saying he thought I might know. He said he thought he knew who I was talking about, and if you're watching this, I'm curious to know if the person you were thinking of was Rod Temperton. Part of me almost guessed, because he's a big fan of early 2010s music, that he was thinking of Max Martin, which is another person I really love. I mean, if not him, maybe Ryan Tedder. Those are some iconic songwriters of the early 2010s, but maybe he was also thinking of this guy, and he was right. I'm curious to find out. But anyways, this guy was big in the late 70s and early 80s, and also a quick moment of RIP because he is no longer with us. He did pass back in 2016, but his work will always remain legendary as a songwriter. And to show you some of the big hits this guy had, we're going to kick off our first song with probably one of Halloween's biggest anthems, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yes, he completely 100% wrote that song. Now, like I said, Michael Jackson also wrote many of his own songs too. Michael Jackson was iconic, but there were a few of his hit songs that were actually written by this guy, Rod Temperton, which I think is pretty interesting. And yeah, we're rating it. So, even though it only made it to number 4 on the Hot 100, I think it's probably easily one of the most iconic songs that's still being referenced today. It was the most iconic song that I could think of right off the top of my head that he wrote. He wrote many iconic songs, but that's the first one that comes to mind, is Thriller by Michael Jackson, taken off his album with that same title, one of the most iconic albums of all time, Thriller. We're going to insert a row below. But I have to say, if I think about all the Michael Jackson songs and all the Rod Temperton songs I know, I wouldn't say it's my favorite, or like I absolutely am crazy about. There's some Rod Temperton and Michael Jackson songs that I just absolutely love. And this one I really think is definitely catchy. It's really fun to dance to, and it's definitely an essential for every Halloween. But I think I'm gonna save some of their other songs for these spots and put this one just at number 8. I've definitely heard it a lot, and there are some songs by Rod Temperton that won't really be covered in this particular episode that I think are actually underrated that I really like. But I have to actually that are like my all-time favorite. What am I saying? This is what I really like is right here. But like I said, Michael Jackson's Thriller is still a really good song that I feel like is very like I said, it's a Halloween essential. We all know that. And it was also produced by Quincy Jones. The entire album was produced by Quincy Jones. I'm not sure if any of you might know who he is. He's another sort of iconic person in, well, Michael Jackson's the real icon, but they were definitely helpful, I could at least say, in producing his album. Well, Quincy Jones was the producer, and you might know who he is because he actually has released multiple albums on his own. Like he has albums of him like that are that what am I trying to say? That he's like titled on, you know? Like he's released his own albums. That's as simply as I can put it. And he produced basically Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. 3 of the most iconic albums that Michael Jackson had. Now, of course, Michael Jackson is ultimately responsible for like making those albums as big as they were, but Quincy Jones also had his share in making them sound really good too. And one of Quincy Jones' go-to songwriters was Rod Temperton. So a lot of the songs you'll find that Rod Temperton wrote are produced by Quincy Jones. So, yep, that is basically all I have to say about that one. So moving on to the next song, we have to go back in time a little bit, a few years from 1982, back to the mid 70s, to the start of Rod Temperton's career. He actually started out as the member of a band, of a pretty famous band, at least in the 70s, as the keyboardist and main songwriter for the group. And that group is none other than the disco funk band Heatwave. So, our next song, that brings us to our next song, is probably their biggest hit, Boogie Nights from 1976. It climbed all the way up, and as much as I don't hear that song referenced as much today as Thriller, it's definitely, many people still consider it a 70s essential. And it peaked all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. So it's definitely, I think, a disco essential. And like I said, Heatwave, and like I said, this song was actually not produced by Quincy Jones. Like I said, this was one earlier in his career. I don't think Quincy Jones did a lot of work with Heatwave itself, the band. But when I think it was like around when Rod Temperton started expanding out his career and stuff and starting to write for other artists, that Quincy Jones really used him a lot in writing songs for other artists. So, anyways, oh, Boogie Nights. I really like that song. I don't know if I'd say it's my all-time favorite, but I think it's going to go in 9 songs I love. Because it's the opening, of course, is really cool. It's like there's harps and stuff. It's a really cool opening. And then as you get into the actual hook, the harmonies of Heatwave are so catchy. It's such a talented group through and through. All the members were just super talented. And like I said, that song is definitely an earworm for sure. I don't know if I'd say it's I don't know if I'd go all the way up here to say it's my all-time favorite, but I do really like that song a lot. Next song is, I'm not sure how many of you have heard this song. It was another very iconic song, disco song, of the early 80s, and that is George Benson, Give Me the Night, from right smack dab in 1980, at the beginning of the decade. Another song produced by Quincy Jones, written by Rod Temperton. It peaked at number 4 on the US Hot 100, Billboard Hot 100. Um, and like I said, that song, I've heard some people talk about it as it's a really good song. One of the videos for it released on YouTube actually had over 100 million views, which I have to say is quite a lot, especially for an older song. And I also, like I said, I'm not sure how many of you have heard that song. I haven't heard it referenced today anywhere near as much as like Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson's the icon. But this song is also really good. But like I said, I think I'm probably also gonna. Oops. Actually, I'm glad that happened, because. Okay, I'm glad that happened because I actually want to put it here. Like I said, I was thinking about it, and for a while I kind of was a little bit like, oh, the song's okay at first. And then I really have listened to it. I remember listening to it quite a bit during the pandemic, and I realized that the production of it, which was produced by Quincy Jones, is really nice. And the melodic, like the verses and the kind of the leading up to the chorus is just really nice. It's another really catchy song from that time period. And I'm going to have to put it there because I actually love it. All right, so our next song is another song by Michael Jackson, probably the other most iconic song, one of the other iconic Michael Jackson songs he wrote. Like I said, many of the iconic Michael Jackson songs were written by him himself, but there are a couple. Like I said, Thriller is one, and then another one, which I think is one of my all-time favorites. It's very popular, it's played a lot, but it's really grown on me over the years, and it's also one of his two US Billboard Hot 100 number one, like one of his number one singles. So the song is Michael Jackson, Rock With You. We all know that one, and it's definitely one of my favorites. There's something about that song, it's just the production of it. Again, produced by Quincy. I already mentioned that he produced the Off the Wall album, which is what this song is on. Like I said, I'm sure there's many Michael Jackson fans here, so you all know his discovery and stuff. But, yeah, I really like it. The production, even though it's one of the popular songs, the production in it is really nice. That synthesizer in the intro, I love the strings in it, the verses, and then, like I said, again, really catchy hooks. So, chorus. So, yeah, that's definitely a 10 for me. Now, our next song, I already know where we're going to be putting this one. This one has always been one of my all-time favorite songs. And it surprised me because it doesn't get referenced as much anymore today. In fact, I don't know if I know a lot of people that actually talk about this song much anymore. But it was actually his only other number one hit on the Hot 100. So I was surprised. I'm surprised like Thriller only went to number 4, but this song only went to number 1. I mean, yeah, this song went all the way to number 1 because I don't hear people talk about this song anywhere near as much as I hear them talk about Thriller. And it might be because it's more of a slow, sappy song, but if you know me and my taste in music, I am a sucker for slow, sappy songs. I don't know why that is. I'm a big fan of love songs, especially older love songs, like ones that have a lot of strings in the production and just have a really nice and like those major chords. And then, like I said, I'm getting into like the details of production here. But the song is by Patty Austin, who worked with Quincy Jones a lot. and James Ingram, who also worked with Quincy a lot. Like I said, another song produced by Quincy, written by Rod Temperton, Baby Come to Me, 1981. It is a love duet between the two of them. It's just, I love that song. I've always loved it ever since I first heard it, before I even knew it was written by Rod Temperton. And it's a really good song in my opinion. And I just, like I said, I could always listen to that one. And I wish it was referenced more today, but I know a lot of people aren't a big fan of love songs and prefer things that are more upbeat. Which, again, me too. I also love stuff that's upbeat, like Rock With You by Michael Jackson. Oh, by the way, did you actually know? I should mention a fun song fact here. This song, Rock With You, Michael Jackson, was originally written for the Carpenters. That's right, like Karen Carpenter, Richard Carpenter, the band in the 70s. I don't know if you know who they are. They did like songs like We've Only Just Begun. If you grew up in the 70s, though, you have to know who they are. I mean, they were iconic in the 70s, and I love Karen Carpenter. I mean, the Carpenters, they're one of my all-time favorite bands. But like I said, that surprised me that this was written for the Carpenters, and it's very upbeat. The Carpenters often have more slow, stringy songs, which is another reason I love them. I just mentioned I love 70s and 80s love songs. And that was exactly the reason why they didn't record it. They felt like this song was too upbeat. And I'm going to be honest, while I love the Carpenters and I would have loved to like hear them like release a version of this song, I really feel like Michael Jackson, like this was his song, you know, even though he didn't write it. I feel like it just kind of belonged to him in some ways, even though I love the Carpenters. I don't know if there's a demo of them performing it. I'll have to find if there's a demo performing it sometime. Maybe I could even rate that to see how that actually sounds, because that was a fun fact I learned. I had no idea. I mean, I guess I'm not super surprised after hearing about, because I know there are actually some songs that Rod Temperton did write for the Carpenters that they released. So I guess I wasn't too surprised that I heard that he wrote this for them as well. But like I said, maybe I think this might have even been how Quincy first started, like, getting into contact with Rod Temperton. I can't remember exactly how the song got offered to Michael Jackson, but I think this was the first artist he worked with that was outside of Heat Wave. So like I said, I might have to do a little more research on that. I can update it in the comments section. But like I said, that's what I know about it for now. So those are his two number one hits. Baby Come to Me, Rock With You, which I put at the top of my list too, because obviously those are just really good songs, I guess. So, the next song we're going to rate is one that, even though it only actually made it to number 18, it didn't even make it into the top 10, but it made it to number 2 on the Soul Billboard charts, and it is actually Heatwave's most Shazammed song, so it must play a lot. I noticed it has over 2 million Shazams, even more than like Boogie Nights, which is like their biggest song, which only has less than 1 million Shazams. And it might be I'm not sure, it might even be their most viewed song on YouTube too. And it's another very slow, sappy love song. And it is also one of the first songs, actually I believe it is the first song that was like recorded, written by Rod Temperton. It is off the same album as this. It is called Always and Forever by Heatwave. And I was originally this close to putting it at a 9 because, I don't know, for some reason I really loved it, but it didn't like strike me as one of my all-time favorites. But I thought I'd give it another listen. It's kind of a long song, and so I thought I'd give it another listen because I couldn't remember it really that well in like absolute detail. And I could only remember sort of the hook and stuff, so I listened to it again, I realized it's actually really well produced. Even though it's not produced by Quincy, it's really well produced. The strings, it's got those strings I love. And it's just a nice song. If someone said they loved this song, I would be like, wow, that's really cool. And like I said, that's one of the ways I rate a song, by thinking, what would my reaction be if someone else loved that song? So that goes there. So our next song is another very iconic song. It's an artist we haven't done yet in this episode. And even though this song only made it to number 7 on the Hot 100, it's definitely another very iconic song. Kind of falls with this. It's also released in 1980. The song is called Stomp by the Brothers Johnson. If you're an early 80s disco fan, I'm sure you know that one. So, and I remember hearing that song all the way back, as far back as 2017, and long before I knew it was written by Rod. And I just, at first, I might have back then put it at 8 because I liked it, but again, it was another song I kind of listened to during the pandemic, and I just love. Like, I heard it in 2020 again, I think, for the first time after not hearing it for like maybe a year or something. Then I realized, wow, this song is actually really good. The especially the production during the another Quincy song, by the way, produced by Quincy Jones. And it's just, like I said, in addition to being a disco icon, it's just the background, the production, especially during the verses particularly, it's just so funky, it's so upbeat, and it's got just a really nice sound to it. So that's definitely a 10 for me. All right, we have a couple more songs left. Like I said, he wrote many songs, and because I really like this guy's songwriting, I might get into more episodes about some of his more deep cuts and stuff that I really like but isn't as well known. I'm mainly sticking this episode to his hit songs, songs that like you would hear people growing up from that time would know. Like these are all songs that played on the radio, I'm sure played on the radio a lot during that time, and were kind of hit songs of like the late 70s and early 80s. And I'm just, like I said, this episode is just to show you that this guy wrote all those songs. So another song, even though these were probably the two big Rod Temperton written Michael Jackson songs, there is one other one that I think is pretty big. It actually went all the way to number 10, right to number 10, peaked right at number 10 on the Hot 100. It is the same name as his first solo. No, not his first solo album. He released solo albums as a kid when he was in Motown, but his first album, sort of out of the whole Motown thing. We just talked about it. It's the same album as this. I'm sure you already know what it is. I've said enough. It is Michael Jackson, Off the Wall. Yes, this is another song that was written by Rod Temperton, peaked to number 10, and I also really like it. I didn't really listen to it much until like this year, and then when I heard it, it was just like, it's a really good song, and it's also just another one of those catchy. It has that Rod Temperton sound. After listening to a lot of his songs, I really get used to his sound. It's got that Rod Temperton sound to it. It's also just got the beautiful production of Quincy Jones, the great vocal and delivery of Michael Jackson, and it's just super catchy, and it's got really, I love the chord progression in it. It's a really good song, so it's another number 10 for me. Then that brings us to our final song, which is another song from Rod Temperton's. I don't know if he formed the band, but Rod Temperton's kind of raise to fame in the band Heatwave. This is from their second album. Like I said, both the songs we rated here were from their first album. What was it? It was Too Hot to Handle. That's what that album was called. The next one was called Central Heating. It was released 2 years later in '78. And the biggest hit, and maybe potentially their it might potentially be their only other kind of. They didn't have a lot of huge hits. These were probably the three main hits I could think of: is Boogie Nights, Always and Forever. Um, yeah, I'm trying to decide whether to rate this one 9 or 10 before I reveal the title. I think I have to go with the 10 because I like it a little better than Boogie Nights. Well, yeah. Nope, not where I meant to. Actually, I meant to put that below. Heat Wave. So, as I mentioned, Boogie Nights, Always and Forever, and The Groove Line from 1978, a couple years later than those other ones. And that pretty much wraps up. Oh, actually, I should I should talk about why I like this one a lot. It's got a really BA intro to it. I love the synthesizers um that just sort of lead you into the song at the beginning. It's so cool. But I also love the intro for Boogie Nights as much as I love this intro. And then it's also got a really cool jazzy horn riff right before they get into the first chorus. Like I said, I sometimes wish I could just play these songs for you, but YouTube copyright, but definitely recommend a listen. And if you hear that horn riff right before they get into the first verse, it's just it's just a really well produced song. Even though I also don't think it was produced by Quincy. It's also just a really well produced song. So with that wraps up today's episode of rating 9 songs. We rated 9 songs by the Invisible Man, Rod Temperton. So before I end this episode, I just want to give another little hint about next episode. And I'm going to give the hint by saying it's going to become. This is as much of a hint I'm going to give, and it might basically give it away. I'm going to explain why this episode, the next episode, is actually going to be released in just a couple days. Because I feel like if I don't release it fairly soon, it will no longer really be considered culturally appropriate. I don't know if that's the best way I can say it, to release this episode. So it's music that, well, yeah, I think that's basically all I'm going to say. If you know what I meant by that, feel free to give a guess in the comments, but that is it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks so much for watching. Remember to comment, rate, and subscribe. Yay!